When he heard Fuyo's explanation, Shilian thought in his heart, this name was truly unnecessary. If it was a devastation, then it was a devastation. If it wasn't, then it wasn't. Just like how there were only the phrases ascended and haven't ascended yet. There were no such things as near ascending or approaching ascending. On the contrary, adding on a near word made people feel awkward. Suddenly, Shilian recalled how the teenager who had robbed his sedan had held his hand and led him here. Back then, there were really had been a moment where the sound of rain hit the umbrella that the teenager had opened. Could it be that the reason the teenager opened an umbrella was because he had wanted to block him from being drenched by this rain of blood? Ah, Shilian quietly let out a noise. The two small martial gods beside him immediately asked, "What's wrong?" Shilian gave a brief explanation of how he had met a teenager on the sedan and how the teenager brought him here. When he finished, Fuyo said skeptically, When we came up here, I had sensed that befuddling array. It had been extremely treacherous. However, you saw that guy had just destroyed it without any extra trouble?" In his heart, Shilian thought, it wasn't without any extra trouble. That guy had just casually stepped onto it. He didn't care about it at all. However, Shilian said, "That's right. Thus, do you guys think that this near devastation green ghost is him?" Nanfeng thought for a moment before he replied, "I haven't seen the green ghost before, so it's hard for me to say. Did the teenager have any special characteristics?" Shilian said, "Silver butterflies." Just now, when Nanfeng and Fuyo saw the forest of corpses, their expressions could have been considered as completely calm. However, the moment he said that, Shilian clearly saw the expressions on their faces immediately changed. Fuyo asked in an incredulous tone, "What did you say? Silver butterflies? What kind of silver butterflies?" Shilian sensed that he had probably said something quite important. He replied, "They were silver, but they also looked as if they were made out of crystal. They were not alive, although they did look extremely beautiful." Then, he saw Nanfeng and Fuyo exchange glances. Both of their complexions became extremely ugly, paling until they were deathly white. After a while, Fuyo spoke up in a deep voice. "Let's leave. Let's immediately leave." Shilian asked, "The ghost bridegroom case hasn't been solved yet. How can we go?" Fuyo responded, "Solved?" Fuyo turned around and smiled grimly. "It seems like you've truly stayed in the mortal realm for too long. This ghost bridegroom is no more than a wrath. And even if the green ghost was responsible for this forest of corpses, he is just a near devastation and would only give us a headache." After pausing again, Fuyo's tone unexpectedly became quite stern. "However, do you know who the master of those silver butterfly is?" Shilian honestly replied, "I don't know." Fuyo stiffly said, "Even if you don't know, currently we don't have enough time to explain it to you. In short, it's not someone you can go against. You should just hurry back to the heavens and send off some rescue and squad soldiers." Shilian replied, "Then you return first." "You!" Shilian explained, "The owner of those silver butterflies didn't reveal any malice, and if he had been hiding his evil intentions and is truly as scary as you make him out to be, Then I'm afraid it'll be hard for us to escape him when we're within the Mount Eugene range. At this time, it's best if someone stays back and guards this place. That's why it's better if you return first and see if you can help me by sending over a rescue squad. He could tell that Fuyao didn't want to stay here and deal with all of these troublesome things. Since he didn't want to stay, Shilian definitely wouldn't force him to reluctantly stay here. Fuyao was precisely a straightforward kind of person. Without another word, he brushed his sleeves and actually left. Shilian turned toward Danfeng. He was about to speak up and thoroughly question the small martial god about the teenager. However, the crowd of people was suddenly in an uproar. Someone exclaimed, "Coat it! We coat it!" With this, Shilian didn't have any time to ask Nanfeng more questions. He immediately asked, "What did you catch?" Two bloody figures began walking out of the forest. One was a strong and buff man. He had been one of the people who had taken the lead in rushing into the forest. Surprisingly, he hadn't been scared into retreating because of the fires of corpses' rain of blood. He could truly be considered as someone daring and fearless. The other figure was the young boy he had been dragging out with his hand with a death grip. This young teenager had bandages wrapped around his head and face in a messy manner. Shilani still remembered what the T-Familiar from the chance encounter Little Store had said. Rumors state that the ghost bridegroom is an ugly creature that lives on Mount Eugene. Because he was born too ugly, no woman would like him. This is why his heart gave birth to resentment, and why he would snatch other men's brides to prevent the couple from experiencing a happy occasion. At that time, Shilian and his team had thought it was just a rumor. Unexpectedly, there really was a person like this. But him existing was just him existing. Whether or not he was the ghost bridegroom was another matter entirely. Shilian was just about to carefully take a look at this bandaged young teenager when suddenly, Little Ying rushed over and exclaimed, "You guys are wrong. This isn't the ghost bridegroom. He isn't." The youngster retorted, "He got caught red-handed at the scene, and you still say he isn't? He suddenly stopped talking before he looked at it as if he had realized something. "Oh, I kept asking why you were so weird. Always continuously going, it's not. It turns out you were colluding with the ghost bridegroom." Little Ying was startled by his accusation and began repeatedly waving her hands. No, I'm not involved. And he isn't either. He really hasn't done anything before. He's just an ordinary... The youngster aggressively asked, "An ordinary what? An ordinary ugly creature?" He carelessly grabbed the top of that bandaged teenager's head twice. "Then let us take a peek at what this ordinary ghost bridegroom looks like, to be so fond of robbing other men of their wives." His two movements caused some of the boy's bandages to loosen. That induced the young teenager into hugging his head before screaming. His voice was brimming with fear, sounding extremely mournful, yet extremely pitiful as well. Shilian grabbed the youngster's elbow and said, "Enough." Hearing the boy's miserable screams, Little Ying's tears immediately began rolling down her face. However, when she saw Shilian stepped in, she looked at it as if she saw her light of hope. Immediately, she clutched his sleeve and begged, Young lord, help me. Help him." Shilian glanced at her. Little Ying immediately let go of his sleeve in an embarrassed manner. She looked as if she was afraid he would dislike her because she had touched him, and thus wouldn't help her anymore. Shilian comforted her. "It's all right." Then he took another look at that bandaged teenager, covered in blood. Suddenly, he noticed that the boy was looking at him with a pair of bloodshot eyes. In fact, he had been peeking at him through the gap between the bandages hanging from his arms. The teenager had only stolen a single glance before he immediately bowed his head again to redo his bandages. Although he hadn't exposed his face, the little skin that had been revealed was already extremely frightening. It looked as if his skin had been burned by a fierce fire. It wasn't hard to imagine what kind of a horrific face he would have under his bandages. It made other people suck in a breath of cold air, and that reaction made the young teenager shrink in on himself even more. Shillian noticed that unexpectedly, both Little Ying and this teenager cowered in the same manner, as if they didn't see light all year round, as if they didn't dare to meet people either. As Shillian sighed in his heart, the youngster beside him became on guard. "What do you want to do?" "The ghost bridegroom was caught by us." Shillian let him go and explained, "I'm afraid it wouldn't be that simple for you guys to capture the ghost bridegroom. Just now, my friend had searched for him in the vicinity and didn't find him. This boy probably only came afterwards. The real ghost bridegroom should still be hiding somewhere here." Little Ying summoned her courage and said, "You want the reward? But you can't randomly grab people and claim they're guilty." When the youngster heard that, he once again wanted to make a move. Ever since this case began, this guy kept causing trouble for Shillian. At the end of his patience, Shillian waved his hand. The silk roya abruptly shot out and slapped the youngster, causing him to take a tumble. And it seemed that Nanfeng had already also reached his limit, for he swiftly gave the youngster another kick. Finally, the youngster hit the ground and didn't get up again. That youngster was a specialist in stirring up trouble. Once he stopped moving, the crowd didn't know who they should follow. Thus, they became rather well behaved. In fact, even after a few sparse shouts, they couldn't create a disturbance. In his heart, Shillian thought, "I can finally begin handling affairs." After sizing up the young teenager on the ground, After seizing up the young teenager on the ground for a moment, Shillian asked, "Were you the person who threw that stone into the window?" Although his voice sounded gentle, that teenager still shook like a bamboo sieve. He once again took a secret peek at Shillian before he nodded his head. Little Ying replied in his stead and said, "He doesn't want to hurt anyone. He only saw how the youngster looked as if he was going to hit me, so he wanted to help me." Shillian questioned the teenager again. "Those corpses hanging in the streets, do you know what's going on there?" Little Ying replied, "I don't know what's going on, but I definitely know the corpses weren't hung by him." That teenager kept trembling, but he still began continuously nodding his head. Nanfeng, who had been staring at him, suddenly asked, "Do you know who the green ghost Chirong is?" When he heard that name, Shillian became slightly startled. On the other hand, the teenager looked obviously at a loss. He hadn't reacted at all toward that name, and he also didn't dare reply to Nanfeng. Little Ying said, He's just scared and doesn't dare to speak." She kept trying to protect this strange teenager at all costs. Thus, Shillian asked in a warm tone, "Young lady Little Ying, what's the matter with this child? Whatever you know, let me hear about it first." When she saw Shillian, it seemed as if Little Ying managed to summon a bit of courage. Even when the flame of the fire illuminated her face, she didn't hide. Instead, she wrung together his hands as she said, He really hasn't done any misdeeds. This child only lives on Mount Yujun. When he becomes too hungry, he'll go down the mountain and steal some food to eat. Once, he happened to end up in my house. I saw that he didn't really know how to speak, and that furthermore, there were wounds on his face. So, I found some cloth bandages to wrap up his face, and sometimes I would send him some food to eat. Originally, Shilan thought that these two were perhaps a couple. However, now it seemed as if Little Ying's protection for this teenager was more like an older sister's protection to her younger brother, so much that she resembled a senior who took care of their juniors. Little Ying continued to speak. Afterwards, there were a lot of people who began believing that he was the ghost bridegroom. I couldn't do anything about it, and could only hope that someone would quickly catch that genuine evildoer. I thought that since, young lord, and your companions are this powerful, even if you disguise yourself as a bride to catch that ghost bridegroom, in the very least, you definitely won't catch the wrong person. This is because he absolutely wouldn't go and rob your marriage sedan. However, who would have known that after I left, I heard that the youngster and his team intended to go up and search the mountain as well. I was truly too worried, so I secretly followed them up to take a look. She stepped in front of the teenager to protect him, as if she was afraid that someone was going to hit him again. Then, she began defending the teenager once again. He truly isn't the ghost bridegroom. Look at him. Only a few people were able to beat him up into this state. How would he have been able to beat all those military officials who had accompanied the bride's sedan? Shilian exchanged glances with Nanfeng, both feeling an extreme headache. If what Little Ying had said was the truth, then wasn't this teenager completely unrelated to their current assignment? The bandaged teenager, the ghost bridegroom Wrath, the near devastation green ghost. Oh, and I couldn't forget that powerful master of those silver butterflies. Someone could even make the complexion of a heavenly official's face change when they were brought up in a conversation. A small Mount Yujun actually had this many guests who kept visiting it. It really made it impossible for people to deal with this. Who was who? Who had a relationship with who? Shilian felt his head swimming. Shilian rubbed the spot between his eyebrows. For the time being, he didn't ponder over how much of Little Ying's words were genuine or false. Instead, he suddenly recalled the question he had always wanted to ask. Young lady Little Ying, have you always been living around the Mount Yujun area? Little Ying replied, That's right. I've always been living here, so I can guarantee that he has never done any bad things. In response to that, Shilian said, No, I wanted to ask you another question. In the Mount Yujun region, other than the temple here, has any other Mingguang temples have been built? Little Ying stared blankly for a moment. After thinking it over, she continued to speak. Yes, they should have been built. When he heard her answer like this, Shilian suddenly had the faint feeling that he had stumbled upon something quite important. He asked, Then why is it that under the mountain, only Nanyang temples were built and not Mingguang temples? Little Ying scratched her head before answering. It has indeed been built before. However, I've heard that whenever they make the decisions to build a Mingguang temple, the temple would always catch on fire for no reason before it was completed. Someone then said that they were afraid General Mingguang had a reason for being unable to safeguard this place. Thus, they chose to build a Nanyang temple instead. Nanfeng noticed that Shilian's gaze had become focused. He asked, What's wrong? Shillian suddenly realized that everything was too simple. The brides that couldn't smile, the temple that caught fire for no reason, the Mingguang temple locked up by the befuddling array, General Pei's impressive-looking godly creature, and the ghost bridegroom who had disappeared after it was hit by the silk roye. It was too simple. However, something had been continuously blocking his line of sight, making Shillian unaware of these simple facts from the very start. He suddenly grabbed onto Nanfeng and exclaimed, "Lend me some spiritual energy." Being grabbed like this, Nanfeng stared blankly for a moment before he hastily slapped his palm against Shillian's hand. He once again asked, "What's going on?" Shillian dragged him along as he began running. I'll explain later. I'll explain later. For now, think of a way to subdue the corpses of those 18 brides." Nanfeng asked, "Are you confused? There's only 17 brides, unless we add on you to make 18. Shillian replied, No. Before, there had only been 17 corpses. But now, there's 18. Within the corpses of those 18 brides, there was one that's fake. The ghost bridegroom has mixed itself in." End of chapter 9.